was nominated for Filmfare Awards 2019, showcased at the Indian Panorama at the 50th International Film Festival of India, Goa, amongst others. Her most recent works include Sunnyside Ooper, a Netflix documentary, Indian Matchmaking, and a documentary titled Kicking Balls. Sunnyside Ooper went to NYIFF, CSAFF, and is now streaming successfully on Flipkart Video. Our heartiest welcome to you, ma'am. We are extremely delighted and honored to have you here with us today. We, as aspiring cinematographers, directors, and producers, are extremely grateful to you for sharing your valuable insights on cinematography, the art of direction and production required to make it in Bollywood and beyond. So, without any further ado, I would like ma'am to enlighten us with her precious knowledge. Ma'am, please, the platform is all yours.
Thank you, Bhavya. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. Just one thing which happened since that introduction was perhaps written is that the short film is actually on Netflix. It's part of Zindagi in Shorts. So that's where, it's available for everyone to see. And yes, I mean, I started my journey as a cinematographer. It was purely out of no, I mean, it was not a planned journey of mine. Honestly, I was not really clear when I was in college. When I was in ARSD, I was not very clear as to what exactly I want to do in films and if I can even if I can even work in films, because back then things were not so easily accessible. The invent of the entire digital cinema started from about, I mean, it picked up from about 2008, 2009, and that was the time when I was also transitioning from my job, and I had decided to go to a film school and study properly. I actually went to the film school with direction as my specialization. But then I realized that it's something that I would rather learn something more technical. Direction, while it does require certain technical knowledge, but at the same time, it's a very subjective thing. It's not something that you can just do by learning. It's also it's your own personality which comes out in how you direct things. So I instead took up cinematography, and then I pretty much fell in love with the craft. Before I actually took up cinematography, I didn't even know who a cinematographer is. I don't know how many of you have that introduction, because things have definitely, people do have more clarity about filmmaking than they used to have. I mean, earlier all we were aware of were the singers, the actors, the directors, and that's it. And most of the times you'll see a director behind the camera and looking through the eyepiece. And people think that, okay, so so the question that I was posed when I became a cinematographer and I would tell my family or who have no idea about filmmaking, and everyone will be asking me the question that, okay, so the director doesn't shoot the film. And I'm like, no, they don't shoot the film. And honestly, I didn't really judge them for this question because I myself didn't know that. So uh, that's how um, not knowledgeable even I was when I got into this whole business of cinematography. So before I even start to talk more about cinematography, because that's what this session is about, I just wanted to, get a couple of answers from anyone uh, to know what their understanding of cinematography is. Any volunteers for that?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I might be wrong, very much wrong, but as much as I understand, it's about where to put the focus of audience in a film or a short film. where does the director or the cinematographer rather wants to put the focus of the audience. The art is called cinematography. Ma'am, you are on mute. Sorry.
I was saying that that is true in a broader perspective. That's what cinematography would mean. But at the same time, there's a lot more that goes into it. So, films can be made on a mobile phone as well. Films can be made on a DSLR camera as well. But as you, and of course, for a film, for a good film, story is the king. If you don't have a good story, if you don't have good actors to perform that story, then no matter what you do with the film, everything else is of no, I mean, is film is a collaborative process. So everything put together makes a good film. And but the visuals that we see on screen, many times there are visuals like if you see a Bhansali film, the visuals are grand. And if you see an Anurag Kashyap film or any of the independent cinema films, the visuals are very real. It seems as if all those are part of cinematography. And it's where the director and the cinematographer and the production designer, as Abhijit had mentioned in the morning, they all come together and they decide what a visual of a film should be and what all goes into it. So, anyone who's thinking of becoming a cinematographer, the first thing where it starts uh, is one second, I'll just share a very basic presentation that I have prepared. I'll try and share that here and let me know if you can see it.
Yes, ma'am, it's
It's
perfectly visible.
it's visible. So all these things that you can see on the first slide, I mean, I have purposely kept a girl here with the camera because when I joined cinematography, there were very few girls. Now the number has increased. Uh, and you can still see the screen. Good. So now the number has increased, but it is still very, I mean, it's still not as much. I do see that we have quite a lot of girls as well here. And cinematography earlier was always considered to be a very male dominated uh, sorry, I'm just trying to make it full screen. Can you still see the screen? I think it's just going to remain like this, so let it be.
Yes,
Um, so earlier it used to be, a very male dominated uh, profession because of the gear size was bigger and heavier and over a period of time now with the invent of smaller cameras we have those things have changed. So yes, there were, and also many people didn't want to come into films, didn't know about films. So having a girl get into that profession was even more unheard of. But things are changing, and there are more and more girls in this profession. So it is something whoever out here is interested in visuals and photography and everything can definitely make a transition into cinematography, and it's something that should be considered. Uh, just one second. Sorry about that interruption. So I will just move on to the basic introduction to cinematography. And cinematography is nothing but pictures and movement. So let's say if I'm sitting at a place and if I move to a door, and when you're making a video of mine, from me getting up from the chair and moving to the door, you're basically just clicking a lot of pictures of mine and it's capturing my entire movement from point A to point B. Sometimes when we do it just with the pictures, we get something which is called like a stop motion kind of a film. But in this, because of the way the film rolls, earlier the film used to roll, so we call it film rolls. There is a motion blur which is applied, and that's how we capture all those pictures in form of a movement. So to the eye, it's not looking like a jerky movement, but it's a smooth movement of me getting up and from point A to point B. So as in this slide, you can see that over the last maybe 20 years or so, primarily, digital cinematography and computer generated imagery have become even more and more used. It was used even before, but it was not part of the main way of working. But now it has become the main way. CG has become completely part of cinematography now. Um, so this is how cinematography has pretty much evolved, and it has everything to do with so when we are talking about cinematography, we are not just talking about camera. We are talking about lights. We are talking about the kind of lenses that we use, and we are talking about even movement, which you will which I will come to later. So it's a big team when you start making it in a film. When you when you refer to cinematography in a film, it's a set of people who are assigned a certain job, like how Abhijit was explaining in the morning with production design, that there is a prop master, there is an art director, there will be a graphic assistant. So similarly in cinematography also, you have the main person who is referred to as director of photography or a cinematographer, and the director of photography, uh, basically it's his vision. He's like a master of the orchestra. So in an orchestra you have uh, maybe a person who plays the violin, a person who plays the cello, a person who plays whatever other instruments, but they're all told about when to do what to make a melody by the conductor. So a cinematographer is nothing but a conductor. It's a cinematographer who will decide. Of course, everything is done in terms of in conversation with the director. No decision on a film set is ever made individually. That's the difference between being a painter or a sculpture or any other art form which you can do on your own as an individual. When you're working on a film or anything or a web series, basically that video medium, they're all every decision is made uh, as per the script in discussion with the director, with the producer. So it's all about collaboration. And so a cinematographer would decide, like, let's say, which camera to use, which lenses to use. There are, especially with when we used to work only with the film cameras. By film cameras, I mean like a roll of film, like how we used to put in a camera earlier on. I don't know if any of you have, I mean, tried your hands on those cameras where you put in a roll of film and then you click pictures instead of clicking pictures on our phone, which even I do. So earlier there were lesser cameras, very few varieties, just like how we had lesser varieties of television and lesser varieties of anything else. But now we have too many varieties. So a cinematographer ends up deciding, okay, which camera should I use? Which lens should I use so that I will get the look that I want my image to have? What kind of lighting should I do? Should I um just use mostly natural lights, or should I light it with some bigger bigger lights? And or should I just you know do lighting in a way that nobody can tell that it has been lit? And trust me, that happens. Like many times, some of the things that I shoot, people ask me that was it shot with the natural light, because you can't tell that there has been lighting done. And sometimes things are lit in a way that you can clearly tell that things uh, have been lit. Um, so anyway, what I always recommend to anyone who's trying to be a cinematographer or would want to look it up as a career, first you should get your hands on a camera, not like a mobile phone, but a camera, a DSLR, like a basic DSLR camera, and do click pictures, as many pictures as possible, but always keeping in mind the rules of composition. Nowadays, all the information is available online. You can just go and check for rules of composition. You can check about lensing and try those things. That's one. Then look at the work of painters, look at the work of some of the masters. Now, some of our famous Indian cinematographers whose work you should definitely look at. Subrata Mitra, he was the cinematographer for Satyajit Ray. Trust me, like it has been so many years since Satyajit Ray made a film, but I mean, even though his films may look old to, the younger generation, but the quality of the film that we have been making has still not surpassed it. So these masters are someone who you should always look at. You should always study their work, because their work still stands apart, even though it's so old. And that's from where you learn the basics of filmmaking and also beyond. So these are the people who you should look at. Then I've put a picture of Dr. Vijay Lakshmi because she is the first Indian female cinematographer, and she did her first film Chinna Vidu in 1985. So 1985 was the time when the first woman in India became a cinematographer. Like any woman became a cinematographer. And even now, even though there are many, but the ratio is still, I mean, starkly different. Ashok Mehta is also another renowned cinematographer. His compositions used to be brilliant. The way he will compose a shot, Bandit Queen being one of the most famous example, and I would advise that these films should always be looked at. I mean, images, when you're looking at films, you should not just look at them as okay, this is very commercial, this is boring, this is interesting. I think when we are starting out, this is the time to see as much as possible and learn from that, because once you get to work, you won't have the time to visit any of these pieces. So college time, and when you are still studying, that's the only time when you can see the works of other and learn anything from it, and then that stays with you. And of course, then you have to include your own personality in whatever you do. That's what will make you unique. If you just copy somebody else's work, it's not going to make you unique. The idea is not to copy, the idea is to just learn and also get inspired. One of my favorite current cinematographer from India is Pankaj Kumar. his compositions are also, which are uh, his compositions, his lighting, it's brilliant. And cinematography is not about just standing out as something beautiful. Cinematography is also about, when you watch a particular visual, you get moved and you get transported uh, into that world. That's the work. Otherwise, if it was just about actors and story, then we have theater, right? We can just put a set of actors on stage and we can just have them play out a story. But when we put together the other elements of the location, the cinematography, the production design, the sound design, music, then it becomes a film or a series. So I would say that you should always find your role models and learn from them. Some of the people you can see internationally, who you can follow, who I have followed. Roger Deakins is a very famous cinematographer. Uh, Even though he seems very old, but his work is ageless. Like if you see it, even cinematographers today try and bring some element of his work, which he has done in films like Fargo or Jarhead, or most recently 1917 had a very long single take, which everyone was very impressed by. And those are very difficult to execute. I've put Rachel Morrison's picture here also to inspire people that now it's not just about any limitations. You can film, you can do all these physical work no matter what your age or whether you're expecting or anything, you can still do it. I mean, it's too young for you guys to think about it, but never, the idea is that never stop yourself from making a career choice, thinking that your physical being is of any kind of limitation. You can do anything that you want to. So Rachel Morrison was the first woman to be nominated for Oscars. Imagine, like, even in the West, the story is not very different. It's the same. And there aren't many cinematographers even there. The women cinematographers have only started to come up in the last 10 years. There had been one or two here and there, but not in the mainstream. This Ellen Kuras is one of the mainstream cinematographers whose film you might have seen, like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind was a very famous film, which was shot by her, and that was many years ago. But still, the first Oscar nomination was just, I think, 3 years ago. That's when Rachel Morrison got nominated for an Oscar. Didn't win, but even getting a nomination was a first. Then we have the most favorite cinematographer of today's time, Emmanuel Lubezki. His work it stands out because it's very original, and you must have seen it in Birdman or Gravity. And the idea for me to talk about these people is that always find uh, role models and try and get inspired by their work. You don't have to copy it, but it's a good thing to get inspired. Um, I would just take a break here and I would want to ask if there's anything that anyone has to mention or ask. Also, I don't want it to become like a boring theoretical session. So, because when I started making it's very difficult for me to combine like everything about cinematography, because even though I had no idea about cinematography when I joined it, but I'm very passionate about it and I love this craft of filmmaking. So I could just go on and on talking about it, and this time will not be enough. So I would just uh, say that if you have anything specific that you want to know, maybe we can take it like that rather than me just telling about, uh, you know, all the nitty-gritties of cinematography, which can be boring.
Ma'am, so I had one question. As you said that you have been a student of ARSD, and that is wonderful to know. And I wanted to ask that what inspired you to, change your career path and move into cinematography? Like, what was the first thought, and where did you get the courage from?
Uh, I mean, I was not, like I said, I was not very clear as to what I want to do. All I knew was that I wanted to be in films and I wanted to do something in films. And long back when, you know, I was in ARSD and, a bunch of us were part of the first time the Dramatic Society came into being. And I did some plays, and I'd also won an award at some inter-college uh, drama competition. And then I did a play which was organized as a workshop. And at that point, like my mother had sort of said that, like you can't act, as in she didn't want me to act. And so I thought that okay, fine. I mean, I won't act, but I do want to do something in films. And even after that, it took me 4 years of trying to do a job and trying to fit into that, 9 to 5 scheduled life. But I just, something inside me kept on bothering me, that I was feeling that I'm not achieving anything. And like, what am I doing? I should give something which I want to do a try, even if I didn't have any proper knowledge of how things work. So I think more than the courage, it was the restlessness in me. And when you are restless, you also make choices which uh, sometimes may turn out to be the right choices, and sometimes they may not turn out to be the right choices. Uh, Thankfully, I mean, it has been 13 years since I have uh, been involved in uh, this world of filmmaking. 2 years went into film school, and I've been working for the last 11 years, and there have been lots of ups and downs. And but at the same time, I don't think there's anything else that I can do or that I would be happy doing, because no matter what you do, there would always be ups and downs, and you will not always feel satisfied. And but as long as you're doing something that you at least like to do, uh, I think that's enough for the courage part to come in.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for answering.
And so I would just want to quickly tell you about the elements of cinematography that people have to keep in mind. Cinematography has to do with, like I said, composition. By mobile framing doesn't mean framing with a mobile, but it means that you have different kinds of shots. You have shots which are static, where the camera does not move, and you have shots where the camera moves. So that's what mobile framing means. Uh, then there are this different aspect ratios. You can equate it with, let's say, a screen size. Whether you earlier, when we started with films, the way films were designed, as in, by film I mean the roll of film, you could only capture image in an aspect ratio which was pretty much like a square shape. So that's why if you see like a Charlie Chaplin or any of those era movies, you'll see it in a square shape. And then when with the advent of movie theaters, and people wanted that, you want the audience to have a grander view. So then the cinema screens were developed, and then you had these wide screens. Then you had like a cinematic aspect ratio where it's the height is lesser and the width is more. We call it cinema scope, wherein it feels more cinematic. And then a lot of other aspect ratios were developed. That's something which filmmakers sometimes use to their advantage. If they want to show landscape, they go with uh, like a cinema scope sort of an aspect ratio. If they want to show tall ceilings and doorways and that kind of a framing, then they still go for something like which is almost like a square. So those are the decisions which a cinematographer makes in conjunction with the director, and it all depends on the script. Now with digital, most of our TV screens have an aspect ratio which is 16:9. So sometimes you see black bars on top and bottom. Sometimes you don't see it on top and bottom. That's all to do with the aspect ratios. Then, like I said, lenses, exposure. Exposure basically means, in a very simplistic terms, it would mean how bright or dark the image is. But exposure also ends up playing a role in what's in focus and what is not in focus. Like nowadays, if you have probably on a Zoom call or an iPhone call, you can blur the video, the background, and only the person is in focus. You know, so these kind of things are played with. We call it depth of field, which means who is in focus and who is not in focus. Sometimes, if a filmmaker wants to show everything, they keep everything in focus, and that has to do with the exposure, the aperture, basically. That's what determines your exposure. And if you don't want to keep everything in focus, then you set a different kind of an exposure. So these are the things which really intrigued me when I started cinematography, because I had no idea. Like I had zero idea about these things. I was not even a very keen photographer, uh, you know, ever. And my family still tells me, because I'm still not clicking pictures like a mad person. So my family still tells me that how come you're not enthusiastic about clicking pictures, you know? But that's the thing. Like I don't like to click everything. I only like to click what I like. So, but these techniques, when you implement them in your pictures, I mean, when you begin with photography first, that just makes you, that used to at least excite me a lot. I mean, if ever, like how all of us get happy with just a beautiful picture, when we click something good, we are so happy. I used to be happy with, oh, so I can do this also, and I can change the image. That's possible. Like it's not just what I see. I can actually do something with all these techniques that are available. So that's something which excited me about cinematography. And like I said earlier about camera choices, you have like a plethora of camera choices now to make from. That's also exciting. Any one of you who is very excited about, like technical bits and is a geeky kind of a person would also enjoy cinematography a lot, because you can play with a lot of toys. People say that cinematographers love to play with the toys. I mean, like the camera tools and the lights and all the gears that we use. So any one of you who's excited about it, and maybe that's one of the reason why there were like many boys in the profession too, because there are like too many toys to play with, and boys are somehow more inclined towards that. Um, these are like I'll show you some of the examples of the shots that I was mentioning. I mean, the aspect ratios that I was talking about. So these are all classic films from the West, and this is where different aspect ratios are shown. Um, The other thing would be, the again, it's the same aspect ratio. Then comes the camera angles, like how do you angle the camera? Even those require decisions. So I think that I don't want to get into too much of details, but I hope that what I'm saying is making some sense about uh, uh, how many elements are involved in cinematography. So it's not just, like I said, yes, you can shoot your film with even a mobile phone, but you have to think. I mean, there is a difference between when we are just documenting something, let's say as a TV camera person, wherein you just point the camera and you are just filming what's happening. And there is a difference when you put a thought behind whenever you are filming something, uh, as to how much wider that shot has to be, how much closer that shot has to be, how the lighting has to be. Now, this image that you're seeing, there's a lot of darkness here, and there is some bright spot at one place. If you go to a place, maybe that place is not going to have a lighting like this of its own. So, as a cinematographer, you'll have to create it because there's a reason why you're doing this. Maybe you want the focus to go on that chair, whoever will come and sit on that chair where the light is falling more. And that is the decision that you're making as a cinematographer. I believe there's some question as well on lighting from Trisha. Yeah, I agree with you, Trisha. I think that's exactly what I was saying right now. So that's the difference between cinematography and just pointing and shooting with a camera. That pointing and shooting with the camera is what happens in a with a news camera person. And cinematography is even in documentaries. I mean, even in documentaries, if you see some of the good documentaries, it's not just about taking an interview of a person, and it's not just about, uh, you know, uh, capturing whatever is happening. You choose which angle. For example, here it's a high angle shot that the great Orson Welles has used. Again, he's one of the great filmmakers that people look up to. These films can be a little difficult to watch, but I would say that they should still be watched. Here, if you see that the camera level is the same as the actor's level, it's not from a height. Uh, Here, it's from a low angle, and a low angle shot would typically, in a conventional sense, would mean to make a person look uh, a little evil and little sometimes grand, sometimes larger than life. Then you use a low angle shot, and low angle shot combined with dramatic lighting can be used to make a person seem evil. So these kind of techniques were employed long back. If you see 1935, most of the things that we are doing in films today were invented long back. It's not that we are doing anything majorly different. That's why it's important to see those films to also kind of get inspired that and be and try to push ourselves to do better. Because it seems that for me, the thing that I think about is that, oh, I mean, what I'm thinking of is something that was done, you know, 50, 60 years ago. So it's nothing. I have to push my limits. I have to do something more. Mostly to come to your high angle, yes, is it is a crane shot. High angle shot is in a simplistic sense, it's just a shot taken from a height. Now, whether you take it from a crane or whether you get on top of a tree, sometimes in an indie setup, People have done that also. Or whether you put up a rostrum, like a scaffolding which construction people put, or whether you get on top of the terrace of a building and take a shot. All that you have there are ways to achieve high angle shots. Crane would just help that, let's say, in that very same shot, you want to move it from the high angle to the same level. So that's when a crane or in nowadays there are even more advanced techniques like a jimmy jib or a techno crane, which can do multiple movements, uh, with just that, and they are all remotely managed. So remotely, as in with the remote, you can maneuver all those movements. Otherwise, in the earlier times, people had to manually do that. There would be a person who would be pulling the crane down. There would be a person who would be pushing the trolley on the track. So things which were the only thing that we have made better now is that things which were done earlier, we have made them the same things, the execution of it simpler with lesser people, and the equipment somewhat lighter in certain cases. Um, I'll just take this question. Isha has asked, every angle depicts something, as you said about the evil thing. Do cinematographers learn this, or does it come with experience? See, some of the things are, uh, like I said, if you learn from the masters, if you see some of their projects and films and you learn it, and there is a grammar to it. Uh, like I said, for example, if you're shooting with a cinema scope aspect ratio, then it makes things larger. Uh, and the same thing if you shoot in a square shape aspect ratio, it'll make things seem, a little constrained, and as if you might feel that you want to see more but you're not seeing more. So people use it as a way of storytelling. Like if I want to tell a story about a person who is feeling suffocated and who is feeling stuck in her world, I might want to use a square shape aspect ratio because she's blocked. It's like blocked by the walls. And some of the filmmakers use those techniques. They start with a square aspect ratio and then they digitally move into a wider aspect ratio as the person becomes freer, and so people have done that also. So there are many techniques that it's better that you learn to answer your question. And there are things which of course come with experience. Then sometimes, let's say, if I'm not aware that if I take the camera low, it's going to make the person seem a little more dramatic and a little more maybe evil or larger than life, and that character in the story is not like that. I might just take the camera low for just to make the shot look beautiful, but it's not going to work in the story because that's not who the character is. So that's why to uh, know these grammatical language beforehand is better. There's a famous saying that you have to know the rules before you break the rules. So uh, to answer your question, Isha, yes, you should learn these things, and then with your experience, make it better. Um Mohini has asked, how do you decide what script is worthwhile and not feasible? Also, how do you get inspired to make films on certain themes and use certain shots? Um, for me, if I'm working as a cinematographer, to decide whether the script is worthwhile is mostly on the basis of what stories appeal to me. If it's a kind of a story which doesn't appeal to me, then I will not want to put myself, because all this work is physically demanding. Film shoots go on for like in today's time go on for uh, maybe minimum 12 hours, also 16 hours in a day. And if I have to shoot for those many hours every day, then I have to know whether it's really worth putting myself through that kind of a physical challenge. Uh, would I rather not do something else uh, rather than putting my energy into a story which I don't even like? So that's a call which is very personal. I think somebody might like to do a film full of violence and guns, and I don't like that. So I will not do a film like that. Not feasible. I don't think anything is not feasible. What makes something not feasible is the lack of money. That's the only thing which makes something feasible or not feasible. It all comes down to money. So not feasible is uh, decided only on the basis of the budget. Uh, you can, and then you have to also know that yes, you can do anything, but if the outcome of something is not coming out good, like you can write a paper. Sure, I mean, if there's an exam, you'll write a paper because you have to write it. But will you get the result that you want? That's not a certainty. So similarly, you can make any film that you want to make, but will the result be good? For that, you have to invest uh, your time, your energy. You have to plan. You have to uh, do all of those things and execute uh, the work carefully. Uh, how do I get inspired to make films on certain themes, use certain shots? Um, See, certain films, it's again, like I said, it's a personal choice. So certain shots, I mean, although I said that cinematography should just tell the story and should feel seamless, but every cinematographer wants to also shoot beautifully. So for me, the choice of shots is a um, is a choice between sometimes beauty, that it should look good, and sometimes whatever the story demands or whatever the director tells me. Sometimes it's that also. So it's a mix of these. Ronak has asked, sometimes we may have a shot that we like and that conveys our thought behind it, but how do we make sure that the audience also perceives it in a way we want? Uh, I think from my own personal experience, uh, you should just do what feels right to you. That's what makes you, that's what will make you unique. And audience also feels it. Like sometimes if there's some moment that moves me, there will be out of 10, 8 people will get moved by it. 2 may not get moved by it, but that's not something that you can control. So most of the times, if you think as a filmmaker that this shot is conveying the thought that you want to convey, then the audience will get it. But if you're just taking a shot because it's beautiful and you're caught up with that and the grandness of the shot, but you're not really thinking of the story or your character, then the audience will not connect with it. So whatever shot we think of, while there is no harm in that being great or amazing, at the same time, it should not disconnect the audience from, the story or the character. But most of the times, your instincts will guide you, other than, of course, the grammatical knowledge that you will gain. And I think that should be enough. Right? You should not worry too much about whether the audience, beyond a point, you should not worry too much about whether the audience is going to get it or not going to get it. You just do what you want to do if it feels right to you. Nitya has asked, starting from when you first came up with the idea of a film, how much time does it take for you to finish the film, and do you always strive for perfection while creating it? Um, it depends. I think, Nitya, it depends on the length of the film. Like, if it's a short film, I've thought of the idea, you know, in a few, in a week, and let's say if it's a shorter film, you can just do the shooting in 2, 3 days. If it's a longer film, like a feature film, then the shooting days normally nowadays go for about anywhere between 35 to 65 days, depending on the scale of the film. Uh, if it's a film, then the edit and the entire the grade of a film, which involves color correction and a few other things, ends up taking another 3, 4 months. Can take more also. There are films I have known which have been edited for a year. There are films which also get shot in like 20 days. But it all depends on the scale of your film. How many people you have in your film, how many locations do you have in your film, um, so on, things like that. Um, yes, I mean, I wouldn't say that I always strive for perfection. I'm not a perfectionist like that, because one thing that I've seen that sometimes in order to remain perfect, we end up not doing anything. And what I have learned from my experience is that instead of not doing anything because you want to be perfect, it's better to do something, because whatever you do will only bring you learnings. And also, you know, only when you have learnings, enough learnings, can you do something which is perfect. So, yes, you always try your best, but there are so many factors involved in filmmaking, because again, like I said in the beginning, it's not an individual process. We are not painters and we are not photographers. We're not working in we're not working in isolation. You're working with a director, you're working with a producer, you're working with sound recordist and actors and a production designer, and you know all needs to align for something to be perfect. So you by yourself not always can take a lot of onus just on yourself. Where you should strive is you should try and collaborate with people who can help you achieve that perfection. But sometimes that that's not something which will always happen. That's how the profession is. Sometimes you have to work because you have to earn money. You can't always be doing things for the sake of art. So sometimes you have to compromise. But as much as possible, I I will try to do my best. I will not try to ever do a bad job, but I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist either. There's a question from Tilt Film Society. How does a cinematographer look at a scene? What is the process of visualizing how this will be shown? A scene depends on what's what the director wants to convey and what's there in the story. If it's just about, if the scene just is about me sitting and thinking by a window, I probably will not have a movement. I will just have a static camera placed at a position in the room where I can see the environment of where this person is, you know. And let's say if it's the opening shot of me in the film. But whereas if I have if I'm doing something on my computer and it's a mystery film, you know, it's the choice of not just a cinematographer but also a director. Maybe a director would just want to begin with the close up of the hands of this person typing something on the keyboard. Maybe a director would want to uh, enter in the space, or by space I mean the room, on a moving camera, and you know first show the face of the person and then show the face of the then show the monitor where this person is writing, what this person is writing. So there are like a lot of things that you have to think about the motivation behind where you position your camera, how you move your camera, and how you light up that scene. Let's say if it's a suspense kind of a story and it's a completely bright room, people don't feel the suspense in that. If it's like a dimly lit dark space, then you feel the suspense. So those are the thought processes which go on inside when you read a, like, it's like whenever we read a book. I don't know how many of you are also students of literature. I was a student of literature. Whenever you read a book, you uh, just end up visualizing things. It always happens. That's how the you know human brain is wired. So these things are something which come naturally also as you read something. And then it becomes about, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Is the director also thinking something like that? Or maybe what the director is thinking is even better, and maybe we should do that. So it's that kind of a process. Ayu has asked, filming requires a lot of patience and retakes. How do you keep yourself calm and patient while shooting challenging scenes? Uh, unless you're a person who is by nature calm and patient, which is a great quality if anyone has it. Um, I think years of experience ends up making you calm and patient, because there are certain things which you understand are not in your control. You can't do anything about it, and there's no point burning your energy in that. Also, because if it's a long schedule of shoot where you have to shoot for 60 days or more, and you have to shoot for pretty much 12 to 14 hours every day, you know that you have to choose your battles. So there are some battles which are worth fighting. There are some things which you should just, that's where not being a perfectionist sometimes comes in handy, because then you're like, okay, today I have to shoot 20 shots. I have to make peace with the fact that all my 20 shots are not going to be masterpieces. I just have to get 5 shots which will be really good, and the others have to just go with the moment. So you have to have those kind of conversations with you. Also, you have to remember that at the end of the day, your job is as a cinematographer is also to help the director be able to tell the story they want to tell. So um, you cannot take too much time on one thing and sacrifice the time given to other things. You cannot just keep on taking retakes for one person, let's say, and then not have enough time for the other scene at the end of the day. So that's the balance that you have to maintain. Tushar has asked, is blocking also a part of cinematography? If you mean blocking a scene with the actors, yes, because that's what determines how you're going to compose your shot and how you're going to move your camera and how you're going to do the lighting. So blocking is what we refer to blocking is we play out the scene with the actors and we figure out how their movement is going to be, and then start with our process of lighting and deciding camera movements accordingly. Many times these things are done beforehand. Sometimes it's not possible if a project happens on a short notice. You don't have time to prep for all those short breakdowns and all of that. So, but you still want to do a rehearsal with the actors once they arrive on set and just run through the scene with them and see how they're going to play it out so that you can prepare yourselves better. How does working out the details of an actor's moves in relation to the camera work out? Uh, the actor's movement, it all depends on the scene. Like I had explained earlier that if I'm just uh, sitting lost in my thoughts, maybe I'll just I'll just have a camera movement which is static and and is helping in bringing out the stillness of my life. When something is static, it feels that things are, not happening. It's a little mellow. It's a little sad. Whereas if you have a movement, it kind of makes you feel that there's some energy and there's something which is going to happen. Uh, so the movement in terms of the actors depends on that. I hope that I'm answering all the questions to the satisfaction of the people. I'm not blabbering something completely different. Um where was I? Prerna has a question. Can you describe some of your experiences with renowned directors of Bollywood? Um, what I have seen is that every director has a different process. Uh, for example, a director like Dibakar Banerjee is very planned. Uh, he likes to go into his shoot with thorough planning, wherein he would have sketched out all the details and would have had in-depth conversations about with the cinematographer about where the light is going to come from, what the camera movement is going to be. Okay, my actor is going to move from here to here, and then he will direct the actors to move that from there to the way he had thought. Whereas somebody like an Anurag Kashyap is very impromptu. Like he'll come on the set and he will be sometimes still correcting, rewriting his scenes, and then when his actors will come, he'll ask the actors to play out the scene, and then he will put in his given his inputs there itself. And some directors like to act it out. Both Dibakar and Anurag can act uh, pretty well themselves, so they'll act it out and show it to the actors. And so with Anurag, it's like you have to wait after you come on the set and understand what exactly is going to happen, and then you begin your process as a cinematographer. And whereas with the Barker, you already know what you have to do, pretty much to the T.
Thank
I
you.
mean, broadly,
Thank you, Priyanka, for your answer. I'm
thank
Prerna, ma'am. Okay. I don't
yes,
know. I mean, I have a feeling that perhaps I had joined ARST. I think I have a feeling that probably you might have been my student. Not very sure, but yes. Yeah. And
I would have definitely remembered. I passed out in 2005.
yeah, so I was here between 2003 and 2005. I just joined.
Okay,
I just joined.
okay.
Probably I used to teach Dr. Foster's uh, in the second year. Anyway, it's really wonderful having you here, and to see our students grow. From those days when they are so kind of they are virtually without any ambition, and they really don't know what they are going to do. And then here you are in such a challenging and difficult profession, I must say. I know the life out there is so difficult. Like just now you were narrating the two different directors. So obviously with directors like Anurag Kashyap, it can be very demanding. I mean, they might ask you even to work up till 12 or 2 in the night, because suddenly they get an idea and then they say, Okay, this is how, on these lines, now I think I need to have a shot on these lines. Like it's very often said about even many such directors who are known to be extremely creative, and they can be very difficult to work with. Yeah, and quite challenging, isn't it?
Right.
Right.
Right, that's
Right,
true.
that's
Although
true.
although the
Although the
hours of
hours of
the
the
timings are
timings are
pre-decided, we
pre-decided, we
but yeah, it
but
can
yeah, it
always
can
go
always
over.
go
Let's say if
over.
we
Let's
had
say if we had
decided to
decided
shoot
to shoot
from
from
from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 2 o'clock in the night, sometimes it ends up going to 6 o'clock in the morning. So that does happen. But now that you've mentioned Dr. Foster's, I have to actually confess that from my at second year I was fine, but third year I did very badly, attending very few classes. So now that you mentioned Dr. Foster's, I can remember that yes, maybe I I remember. Uh, yeah,
and if you were
man,
busy with Rangayan, if your
yeah,
involvement with Rangayan must have been there, then all the more
yeah,
reason that students would generally skip their classes, because of their involvement with Rangayan. So it's all fine. I mean, it's so good to see you there. One of our
yeah,
illustrious ex-students.
right. I do
And I
remember
do remember
Manjula ma'am
Manjula
catching
ma'am
me by the
catching me
stairs
by the
once
stairs once
when I was
when I was
rehearsing
rehearsing
for a play.
for a play.
Actually, that was the play with Rajkumar Rao, Ek Tha Gadha. And she caught me and she was like, maybe these some people they want because at that time I had no clear plan that I want to be in films. Like people like Rajkumar Rao always knew that they want to be an actor, and that's what they were working towards. But the rest of us didn't really know what we want to do. We were just trying things out. So so Manjula ma'am was like, maybe you should rethink about missing classes for theater. Do you really want to do that? Do you want to make a career in that? And at that time, I didn't know. She was like, then maybe you're not like the rest of the people who want to make a career. So then you should focus on your studies. And I still remember that because she, I think, had some hopes from me academically. And yeah, in my second year, I was not really fulfilling those hopes, honestly. Uh, so okay, I'm going back to the questions. Aditya has asked, um, what are your thoughts on films and TV shows that are purely driven by visuals? Um, are there films and TV shows that are purely driven by visuals? I mean, you'll have to give me some examples because personally, for me, if a film or a series has great visuals but no story, no performance, I don't like it. Uh, I mean, there are some documentaries that I've seen which were purely visual based, and those have been amazing. But and some exceptions, like Tree of Life was one of the films which was very visual driven. It was very poetic, but still there is some theme around it. It's not just visuals. Even Tree of Life had a bigger theme around it. So if you mean driven by visuals in that sense, with something which has a theme and not a very etched out story, I like it. As long as there's a theme, as long as there's a soul to what I'm watching instead of just visuals. Sometimes there are also stories where there are great visuals, but the story just doesn't come out. The theme doesn't come out. Then I'm not very kicked by it. Renuka has this question. In cinematography, how do you use natural habitat and lighting for shots? Uh, you use them to your advantage. Then you have to just plan when you're going to shoot, at what time you're going to shoot. and you're heavily dependent on those factors. You cannot, let's say, if I have a shot during the day and the light goes down, then I have to stop shooting. Um and sometimes it works out very well because I shoot documentaries as well. And some of the times I like my work in documentaries better than my work in fiction. Uh, because nature has a way of throwing out some beautiful uh, light and visuals than we as human beings can ever imagine or create. And many of us take inspiration from that. You know, like you could have a sunlight which is too warm and use it to your advantage to say that this is evening. You can have a light, like for example on Moshmi ma'am right now, there is her face is completely glowing with the light, and you can have the background completely dark, you know and that's cinematic. And for example, right now there behind my head there is a halo created by this natural light seeping in, and you can use these things to your advantage. It all depends on what your style is. Um, Jayant is asking, ma'am, I feel like direction and cinematography are a lot intertwined. That is correct. A cinematographer is not just about the technicality, but also using it to project the director's vision as well as add their inputs. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, like I said, it's not just the director and cinematographer, but also director, cinematographer, production designer, sometimes even sound designer if sound is a very crucial element of the film, as in the background score. Sometimes the shots have to be designed as per the background score because the camera has to move according to that, and all of that, which happens mostly in music videos. Um, and at the end of the day, like I said, we all read a book and we all visualize. Similarly, I read a script and I visualize something. The director must have visualized something. Now we have to talk and understand that, you know, which is a better way. If the director definitely wants his or her way to be implemented, then I, as a cinematographer, cannot question that beyond a point. Because at the end of the day, it's the director's film. I'm not the person who's going to sit on the edit later on, and I'm not the person who's going to do the sound design later on. I'm not the person who's going to direct the actors. So all I can do is I can give out my suggestions. If the director likes it, great. We do that. But if the director wants, there are many times that the director wants me to take a shot that I just don't want to take because it's really bad as per me. And it doesn't look good, it doesn't do anything for the story, but the director wants to take it. Then as a person who is working for the director, I have to do that. That's something that we have to keep in mind, that at the end of the day it's the director's film. Um Moshmi, again, I absolutely love the cinematography of Byomkish Bakshi. Yes, I we had a great time, making that film. We were in Calcutta for almost 2 months. That was like the best time of my life, and I learned a lot because we wanted to shoot it in a very noir style, which is very contrasty, and the lighting is it's dramatic. It's definitely not the natural kind of lighting which you will see in a film like a Masan or a Newton. It's not that zone, and it's every cinematographer's dream to be able to create something with lighting and camera movement instead of just making it natural. So yeah, I think and Dibakar, like I said, is a very planned director. So we had done 2 months of prep pretty much, and took 2 months to shoot the film. And yeah, I mean, it was an amazing experience. I might have some pictures from it, but I don't know how to show it right now. But I'll I'll have to open my account, which If you are interested, I can try and fix, look them up, behind the scene pictures. Um, Isha is a lot of literature students are here looking up to you. That's great. I think literature students can make great filmmakers because, in fact, studying literature is how my interest in filmmaking really started. Because when I read certain books like Shadow Lines or Chronicle of a Death Foretold, I don't know if that's still being taught. I would imagine that in my head, and I was like, I would think, wow, it'll be so amazing to see this in a film. And the way literature opens your mind to the psychology of things and the way the diversity of human nature. I mean, that's what makes a great film. When you see a vulnerable person, when you see uh, a person who's tyrant, when you see a person who's confident, when you see a person who's not confident, all these things make great cinema. And put them in some dramatic event or an iconic event, or some historic event, for me it becomes even better because I always like to uh, see those kind of things, where let's say, for example, in a Chronicle of a Death Foretold, there is a death that happens, and then we know that this person is going to die, but we still, till the end of the book, we are still trying to, somehow we are hoping that this person will survive. Like that's the beauty of, uh, and within that, so many people's characters come out because, yeah. Anyway, I mean, uh, I just love what I learned from literature. I wish that, if Prerna ma'am is still here, I wish that I had taken up my studies even more seriously because one thing which I completely ignored was poetry. And some of the writers who I now hear the name of, and I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, acha, they were there in our course. Oh, but I didn't read anything of this writer when it was in my course, and that's a pity. And nowadays, I'm also transitioning into direction and writing is very difficult for me. And people always ask me that, but you're a literature student, how can writing be difficult for you? Maybe the answer to that is that while I learned a lot from literature, I was not still a very good student. So yeah,
Camera is also like a pen, isn't it? So that's also a
yeah,
text.
yeah. I mean, that's something which I owe it to literature. So I think we've gone over time, and thank you so much for
We don't want it
listening,
to end actually.
for hearing me out.
You and Priyanka, you have been very, very patient. I mean, you've been just speaking and responding to so many questions. I mean,
I'm glad
we
that there are so many questions.
okay.
I love answering questions. And yes, Moshmi, I would love to have a session on Byomkesh if you want to have that session.
Yes, I'm going to come back to you again, and we do teach one Byomkesh Bakshi. We teach the Chidiya Khana, and once I'm done, we can always have you, screen the film, have you. It will be great for the students.
And this is
Yeah,
Moshmi's favorite.
Yeah, I have. What Prerna is saying is that I have a criminal bent of mind.
right. Sure, I would love to be back. And thank you everyone for hearing me out. Thank
Fascinating.
you, Ayush.
I mean, it was fascinating. I mean, there's no words for. Sometimes there are no adequate words. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhavya, and everyone else who's here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was an
What about
awe-inspiring.
picture? What about picture?
Uh,
Yeah,
yes.
the good picture. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just take it.
we will definitely. Yes, ma'am.
Are we done with the photo?
I think we are.
Yes, ma'am. We are done with the photo. Thank you, ma'am.
I just hope to see many of you choosing films as your career and cinematography, direction, anything. They're all equally good.
So now I would like to present a vote of thanks and thank you, ma'am. It has been an awe-inspiring and a really fruitful session. We feel really educated now when it comes to cinematography, and also we will definitely try to apply these insights that you have given to us today in our own projects. And thank you for answering all those questions so patiently and kindly. And I would also like to thank everyone present here. Thank you, ma'am, for your enlightening words. And also, our heartiest congratulations to all the winners today. You guys aced it today. And last but not the least, I would like to present my immense gratitude to all the participants who stayed active and interactive throughout the session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending today's session.
Thank you.
Nani, thank you.
Tomorrow we meet at what, 11:30?
Tomorrow